Welcome to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. On this special edition, I am with Attorney General Daniel Cameron, live from his office. Actually, not live. We're recording this, but Daniel Cameron, thank you for joining us on the Commonwealth Matters.
Richard, it's always good to be with you and good to be with your viewers.
Yeah. You have had a busy year, a successful year by any measure. And I want to start out with one of the most important issues, and we've talked about this before, and that's the issue of opioid addiction in the Commonwealth. There was I don't know if it's a record settlement, but it's a huge amount, $478 million that the state settled with the drug companies. And this is money that's coming back to the Commonwealth that will help those who are dealing with addiction issues. Big chunk of money. And one of the first things that comes to mind as a conservative is when the government has a good chunk of money, the question is it being spent wisely? So there's two parts I want to go with this. The first is, where is that money going? And then the second is it being spent wisely?
Well, let me answer in reverse order. We are going to ensure that that money is spent wisely. 50% of those dollars are going to go into what's called the Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission. I guess the first threshold for any money that is going into this commission is that it has to be used for abatement purposes, meaning anything that will help specifically and exclusively with opioid rehabilitation and to break those cycles of addiction. And I'm confident that the commission that is being headed up by Brian Hubbard is going to wisely and thoroughly review any applications that are submitted for requested funds. And those applications by programs and projects and entities across Kentucky have already been submitted to our office, and they will be grants, or the allocation of the dollars will be awarded on a rolling basis. And again, I have every confidence that the team that has been assembled as part of this commission with Brian's leadership is going to make sure that these dollars are used efficiently and effectively to break those cycles of addiction. So I'm very confident that these dollars, as they come into Kentucky, will be used to end the scourge that has plagued our people for far too long.
I've had a chance to talk with Brian Hubbard and his efforts in trying to identify the groups and listening to the concerns. It's a huge effort, a monumental task. I'm just wondering if there are enough groups out there actually, and I talked to him early on. I don't know what kind of progress he's made since, but I'm wondering if there really are enough groups that can pitch in to help to use this money wisely and efficiently to help with the opioid crisis that we're in the midst of right now.
I think I'm hopeful and optimistic that there are. In fact, we've had town halls all across Kentucky to talk to people in specific regions of the Commonwealth that have been hit hardest by this epidemic. And I'm confident that Brian and his team, along with these programs that are existing, whether they be to proactively stop folks from using drugs or rehabilitate folks, are going to step up to this challenge.
Yeah. Attorney General Cameron, when I approach public policy, and many of the listeners and viewers are aware of this, I look at it from a biblical worldview, and I realize that we're fallen human beings, and we are prone to one thing or another. But I look at the addiction issue, and I see that there's the spiritual component. There's a component of that we're human beings made in God's image, but we live in a fallen world. And when things don't go well, some people might lose a job, or they might come from a broken family. And that's the reality for all of us.
Yes, sir.
And I'm wondering if, there was a real offense here, and there's a reason why the drug companies had to pay this. But I'm wondering if there's another aspect of addiction treatment where the churches could step in, where the faith community could step in to address the spiritual needs, which I would argue, and I'm sure that some people differ on this, but there's a spiritual crisis as much as there is an addiction crisis in the Commonwealth. And I don't know so here's the question. I talked about a lot there, but are you seeing churches more engaged with this issue?
We serve, Richard, I'm speaking to the choir here, but we serve a God of second chances, and grace abounds abundantly. And that's something that, I think as believers, particularly during this time, during this Christmas season, we understand at another level. And churches, whether it's big churches or small churches, in between churches, all of them recognize that we have a role to play in helping find the lost and find the one, right? That needs extra encouragement, that needs the hands and feet of Christ to come alongside them and help on this issue. So I know that churches have, especially in these last few years, have decided to step up to the plate. And even if it's not addressing opioids specifically, we know that churches get engaged on other issues that flow downstream from drug addiction, right? Whether it be child abuse or human trafficking. There are countless churches that have stepped up to be involved in this this mission field in a way that I think, quite frankly, folks just weren't aware of beforehand, and aware of all the devastating consequences that happen because of addiction. And so I'm glad churches are playing a part of this and know that they've been involved in these town halls and the conversations that we're having all across Kentucky, and know that they will continue to be the hands and feet of Christ.
Yeah. Daniel, your office recently defended the Human Life Protection Act and the Heartbeat Bill before the state Supreme Court. Do you have any sense of how the court will rule, especially in light of the Amendment 2 vote? The pro-life voters across the Kentucky came up a little short on Amendment 2, which would have upheld the trigger ban, the Human Life Protection Act. But do you have a sense as to how that will play with the court's ruling?
Well, what I've said from the very beginning, and you and I have talked about this before, is that there's a difference between the amendment that was on the ballot in November and the case that we are currently defending and are awaiting a ruling from our state Supreme Court on. The Human Life Protection Act went into effect as soon as the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade. Human Life Protection Act was passed in 2019 on a bipartisan basis. I talk about this all the time.
Right.
Rodkey Adkins, who is the governor's top policy advisor, voted in favor of the Human Life Protection Act as a Democrat. Angie Hatton, who just lost her race, but as a Democrat, voted for the Human Life Protection Act in 2019. Again, a bipartisan bill that, as the Attorney General, it's my responsibility to defend. And so our Solicitor General, Matt Kuhn, made the what I would believe, convincing argument that, as I think any of us, as just common sense stewards of reading our state constitution, would recognize that there is no right to abortion within our state constitution. And that's the argument that we presented. That's the advocacy position that we presented to our state Supreme Court. I'm hopeful that they will rule consistent with that view. But ultimately, they'll make the determination, and I expect we'd get a ruling here within the next week or so. There's not that many days left in this calendar year, and it's my judgment, it's my view that they will make a decision before the end of this year. And so we'll see. Again, I'm hopeful that what they will focus on is what is before them, the Human Life Protection Act, and how does that align with our state constitution. If they look at those two documents, our Constitution and the Human Life Protection Act, I think they will make a judgment that says that there is no right to abortion written into our Constitution.
To the point about the state constitution, Daniel, the Kentucky Constitution does not mention a right to abortion at all in it, and I think that's really what is at stake, because the Kentucky legislature has been clear as to abortion policy. In the last 6 years, it's about 13 pro-life laws that have been enacted, including the Heartbeat Bill, which protects human life after a heartbeat's detected, a number of other pro-life provisions as well. I've seen arguments made, and I think Judge Mitch Perry in Louisville, the circuit court judge there, struck down, blocked that law for a while and said that there was a right to privacy and there was a right to abortion. He was reading into the Constitution. My question is this: I don't want to get you out on a limb because you're in a certain lane and you have a certain role. But if the state Supreme Court does strike down the trigger law, which is synonymous with the Human Life Protection Act. It's called the trigger ban, which went into effect after Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. But if, let's say, the state Supreme Court reads into the state constitution something that's not there regarding abortion, is there a role for the Attorney General's office to play, or how does that work? Some people might call you and say, Daniel Cameron, we know you're pro-life. We know you've defended other pro-life bills. What would your role be if that did happen?
Well, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. I mean, we will largely, our posture will largely be determined by what the state Supreme Court does. There's so many different things that they could do. They could uphold the Human Life Protection Act. They could put additional exceptions into a law or their analysis of what the Constitution looks like. So our judgments will be based on what that assessment is, and that is something that remains to be seen based on ultimately what they decide.
Sure, very good. Moving on to the next topic, in October, you and State Treasurer Allison Ball sent letters to the Kentucky Public Pension Program regarding ESG investment practices. ESG is short for environmental, social, and governance. And you said in a recent op-ed regarding ESG, you said the fundamental goal of the ESG movement is the destruction of fossil fuel industries. Advocates have used a number of tactics to achieve this result, including enlisting major banks to block fossil fuel companies and the industries that rely on them from accessing the funding that they need. To be clear, ESG advocates are free to invest their money in industries other than fossil fuels. No one's stopping them from doing so. But that's not what's happening. Then you go on to say instead your money is used for their climate virtue signaling, and they want control of your bank accounts and retirement funds, as well as the pension plans of teachers, firefighters, and police officers, so that they can amass enough leverage to force companies to abandon fossil fuels. Now, General Cameron, my question is this. Kentucky is the 7th largest coal producer in the nation. What would ESG policies, if they're embraced by our public pension system, what would that do to the coal industry?
Well, it would devastate our economy, and it would obviously devastate the coal industry. As you noted, we are the 7th largest generator of coal in the country, and because of that, we have the 12th lowest energy cost in the nation. To the extent we have a competitive advantage with our surrounding states and other states in the nation, it's because of reliable and low-cost energy. We would lose all of that if the Biden administration or these hedge fund managers have their way and are able to push forward with their extreme green climate energy policies and ideas. And so any leader in Kentucky who cares about the health and the economic interest of the Commonwealth would be talking about this issue and taking action. And that's what we've been doing in our office, whether it's standing up to the Biden administration or the EPA or looking out for the pensions of our school teachers and firefighters and police officers, because our trustees have a fiduciary duty to keep as the priority the return on investment to our teachers and firefighters and police officers, and anything else is incompatible with their responsibility as trustees for our pensions.
Some would say, well, you don't care about the environment. I don't know if this issue is much bigger than that, but it's actually your Office of Civil and Environmental Law that is taking on this case. Is there a balance? So here's where I want to go with that. Is there a balance between being a good steward of the land and providing cheap energy and providing for a livelihood of coal miners? The coal industry has been important to Kentucky's economy. But it seems that it's easy to polarize, right? We're either all in or all against or all opposed to something. But ESG seems to be all opposed. What you're saying are some very, very strong words here. Their goal is to destroy the fossil fuel industry, which doesn't sit well with Kentucky, which is a leading fossil fuel producer in the country. I want to move on to the next issue. In October, your office announced a multi-state investigation into Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, and Wells Fargo for alleged antitrust and consumer protection laws violations related to ESG. Can you tell us why this investigation was important?
Well, this investigation is important because along the lines of what we've seen by hedge fund managers, this is the same thing we're seeing in the financial services industry more broadly. There is, it seems like, an alliance of big business that has made a determination that they don't like fossil fuels, and they don't care about what that does to the economy or the health of the economy of any given state. And this, again, this would destroy Kentucky on so many levels, either whether it's our economy or the pension programs or the pension benefits of teachers, firefighters, and law enforcement officials. So we, again, have to take a posture as someone who stands up and protects. I often tell people we're in the protection business in the AG's office. Yeah. Someone who is protecting the citizens of Kentucky has to take action, has to aggressively oppose any efforts to push the ESG movement. And I will say that our work is paying some dividends, because Vanguard has decided to leave one of these net zero alliances that was pushing this ESG or these ESG policies. And so the work that we're doing in the AG's office is having a benefit and an impact positively for the economic interests and the economic health of Kentucky and the pensions of our public servants.
Yeah, that's good. So are you hearing from the coal industry? Are they? So ESG is a fairly new thing. Maybe it's been around longer. I've been aware of it for just this year is when I began hearing that term. But how was this the coal industry that brought it to your attention, or the fossil fuel industry?
Well, it's really been brought to our attention by energy organizations, by Treasurer Allison Ball, she and I have talked about this issue extensively. This is something, again, that would have an outsized impact on the lives of so many Kentuckians if these ESG advocates are allowed to have their way. So I'm going to continue to stand up for the interest of Kentucky and our folks here in the Commonwealth, and we've showed on a host of issues that we're going to do so without fear or favor.
The end of the last issue I want to talk about, we are running out of time here, but recently the state Supreme Court struck down House Bill 563, which was the Educational Opportunity Account bill that helped low-income parents pay for certain educational expenses. The court ruled by a unanimous ruling that it was unconstitutional. You had a statement that you released shortly after that said that you're saddened that parents across the Commonwealth won't be able to use their needs-based funding provided by Kentucky's Educational Opportunity Account program to expand learning opportunities for their children, and that your office is committed to helping ensure the best educational opportunity for every child. Is school choice, because this is what the EOA was related to, giving kids in low-income families a choice to go to homeschool or to go to a private school where the parents thought they'd get a better education. But is school choice an issue that your office, other than the statement, that your office is involved with?
We've absolutely been involved, because we were the office defending the educational opportunity accounts, and it is disappointing that our state Supreme Court made a decision that basically said that a well-meaning, well-intended individual who has additional money in their pocket that they want to put into an account that allows a parent of a child who needs that additional help, so that allows them to withdraw from that account to help pay for educational opportunities outside of the traditional public schools. It's so disappointing to see that decision by the Supreme Court. We're going to continue, obviously, to look for meaningful ways in which to help children expand their educational opportunities and help parents. Look, when you have a Department of Justice that labels parents domestic terrorists because they care about the educational opportunities for kids, you've got to have someone in leadership that's going to stand up for those parents and going to stand up for those kids that need the additional help. And look, this is not about public school teachers. I know there are a lot of hardworking teachers across Kentucky. This is about what's in the best interest of parents and kids all across Kentucky. so that we can ensure that we have the best and brightest version of Kentucky's future that we possibly can.
Very good. General Cameron, we are out of time. Do you have any last words?
I want to wish all your viewers and you, Richard, a Merry Christmas. And again, thanks for all that Commonwealth Policy Center does to advance the ball here in Kentucky and be at the intersection of public policy and faith and Christian values. So thank you so much, brother.
Thank you. God bless you.
God
Keep up the
bless
good
you
work.
too. All right.